How do a typical day in a segregation unit in any prison? That's solitary confinement, or the chokey as it used to be called. My nan used to say, incidentally, if you can't fight, that's fight, wear a daft hat. So Bob is on exercise. Forest Bank I'm at, private prison. To get on the segregation units, you come off Main Street, a concrete walkway. Through 2 sets of gates, the landing is straight. Cells either side. The exercise yard was in an alcove. So if somebody was walking down the landing, they could see me observing someone on exercise, because you always had to do that, supervised, but they couldn't see who was on exercise. So the governor and the Oscar 1 shift manager and the troops, 8 of them, marching down the landing like something from Star Wars, stormtroopers, all in the gear, their helmets, the riot shields, full Monty. The Mufti squad, minimum use of force. You know what I'm talking about. The governor walks past me. I pretended not to see him. He went to Bob's cell. Opened the flap. Back of the cell. Back of the cell. He then looks down the landing. I'm just glancing. He caught my eye. Pause. Just like that. Sends the Oscar 1 and the troops back to the adjudication room. Walks down the landing to me. When the landing was clear, other than the lad I was working with, he went part of segregation, he was on overtime, he did and went along with what I said. Give us a minute. Mr. Samworth, you're a TWAT. Why have you done this? I'm trying not to smile. What do you mean, Gov? Who's on exercise? I says, Bob. Okay. You're a see you next Tuesday. Thanks, Gov. I'll have a word with you in a minute. He goes back to the adjudication room. You see, the thing was, Bob had kicked off in the morning. This is the end of the story, really. And the SO, senior officer, had asked him to move cells. He refused, he declined. He didn't like the SO, with good reason. When the SO had gone to get the troops, the riot squad, the Mufti squad, Tornado, me, being of good character, good with prisoners, empathy, understanding, I says to Bob, will he move across the landing to another cell? He'd already got his kit packed. I'll explain that later. I don't want to, Sam. I didn't mind him calling me Sam. I says, listen, Bob, please move across the landing. Don't give the SO the satisfaction of sending in the troops to twist you up just to move you into another cell. Can I have my exercise, Sam? No. No, Bob, you can't. At this point, I knew I was going to be in trouble. I was probably already in trouble for getting him to move cells. You know, using your brain, common sense, no incident, no paperwork, no staff interventions, common sense, common sense. So he put his kit in his new cell and I put him on the exercise yard. After 10 minutes, the governor's gone past. The governor come back out. Would you put Bob back in his cell, Mr. Samworth? Which I did. I'd already said to Bob, listen, if you need to go back in, you get 10 minutes, you get 5 minutes, please do that. He did. And he thanked me. And he thanked the other lad as well. Put him back in his cell. The governor then gave me a dressing down. He says, yeah, you've done the right thing, no interventions. However, you know, these ways and means of doing things, you could have let us know without these lads getting kitted up. Slap on the wrist. All the staff, the troops disappeared. 1 or 2 disgruntled people. No action, no going in and smashing Bob with the shield and the like. They all tootled off. Took it on the chin. I weren't asked, me. The SO then doesn't say anything. He says, I want to speak to Bob. So we go to Bob's door. Now the SO was a window warrior. Every cell has an observation panel. He'd stand at them panels telling people what he'd do if they didn't behave and the like. Winding them up, and then he'd go off shift and leave you or me to deal with the consequences. To my surprise, he says, open the cell door. So when he goes, basic jailcraft this, the SO went straight to the window. That left Bob between me and him. More importantly, that left Bob between the SO and the cell door. I looked at Bob, he looked at me. The look was, please don't do anything. He revved up on the SO, he gave it him full barrels. Quiet, firm. If you do this to me again, and he was polite, he called him by name. If you do this to me again, I'll be coming for you. You're gonna get it. The SO went white. Maybe a 30-second conversation. At that point, I intervened. Bob, that's enough now. Bob looked at me, sat on the bed. The SO walked past me, up to the office. That was it, done and dusted, the incident. Now, let me tell you how it started. In the morning, we had a young lad. I'm doing paperwork in the office. The SO is sat next to me. The young lad come back, he had a sheet. You ask people in the segregation every day at that point, because everything was by application, if they would like a phone call, shower, and an hour's exercise. Come back in, picked up the board, Bob's name, he's not having exercise, he's getting fuck all. That's what he said. I said, what do you mean he's getting fuck all? What's he done? I'm telling you, he's getting fuck all. He was entitled to them things. The SO didn't like Bob. I did. I'll tell you a bit about Bob towards the end. At that point, he told the young officer, very impressionable, to go and tell Bob he was getting fuck all, which he did. He then came back and said he's going to set himself on fire, at which point I left the office, I walked down the landing past Bob's cell, I got the fire hose, which is on the landing, I went to Bob's cell, and I put the fire out. Bob, covered in toilet roll, one or two other bits and bobs, set himself on fire. That's where it started. Denying someone something they're entitled to. All prisoners want is what they're entitled to. Now let me tell you about Bob. Bob was a product of Rosewood House, or is it Rosewood Manor in Manchester. Anyone who's seen the film Scum about Borstal, there's a very young lad taken by some older lads around the back of the potting shed. I'll not tell you what they do to him while staff look on or ignore the situation. Rosewood Manor, lots of that went on. I met a lad who never wore shorts in his life. He was at Rosewood Manor. When he told me, I give a look. He says, they didn't do anything to me, Sam. He says, however, they would fetch young lads as young as 5, 6 and 7 in the night, staff, you could smell the booze, and they bring them back in the morning. He was lined up outside with 3 lads younger than him when he was about 13. They made him strip naked, and then they took the piss out of them. Staff stood there drinking beer. They mentioned this lad had knobbly knees. Look at your knees. Trying to, you know, protect your innocence. Never wore shorts since. Bob was a product of that place, I can only imagine. However, a solicitor turned up one day. I was his personal officer, Bob's. The solicitor wanted a word. He was trying to get people to come forward, taking statements, trying to get people compensation. Bob declined that. Alcohol, drugs, taking a big part in his life. He said, Sam, if I get any money, I'll take my own life. As much as it was a miserable time, horrendous, made me what I am, I don't want to die. He had the scars, Bob, facial scars, where he tried to take his own face off. No counselling, Nothing for him, no psychological input in prison. Only the high profile people. But we had a relationship, me and Bob. I always got on with him. I once saw him coming out of the top jail, this is years later, at Strangeways. Yeah, he's on his bike, about 20 staff, just been wrestling him, trying to restrain him. He's been carried to the segregation unit on his bike. Staff, you know, puffing and blowing, and generally not happy, all hating on Bob. He looks up at me, because I've stood back, I'm coming in. He says, all right, Sam. I says, yeah, I'm Bob, how are you? He said, I'm good, me, Sam. That was our relationship, you know, childhood trauma. Shocking. A typical day in a segregation unit. I'm just going to leave it there, guys. Been shot as always. Main man Brian, thanks for your continued support. God bless you all. Pensioners freezing to death, God bless you all, God bless them. Everyone who is a carer, unpaid carer, because we have got a cruel society. All them people that are living on the streets that I wish I could help. Al City.